This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. I'm your host, Hiking Bob Falcone. You can find me, all my social media, everything you want to know at hikingbob.com. Has links to the social media, my columns at The Independent, my other podcasts we've done, my photography website, my newsletter. You can also send me an email if you have a comment, a suggestion, a thought, anything. Just drop me a line there. I do answer every one of them except for the spam ones. Ask me if I want to buy Bitcoin or something. I don't respond to those. But anything else, I answer all the emails that I get. So feel free to drop by hikingbob.com and check everything out. Today we have a very popular guest on the podcast, somebody you may have seen in the news a lot recently, who's been on here 5 times previous to this. This is the 6th appearance of Mandy Horvath. And you may know her as Mountain Gnome. I guess it's her newest kind of screen name we're going with. And Mandy has a long and varied history of overcoming some serious challenges in life. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to link to it in the show notes to all the other podcasts. You can go back to the beginning, back to 2018 when we first started talking to Mandy, and you could track her progress through life and what she's done. But Mandy is a double amputee from an accident with a train who has not let that defeat her. She came to Colorado. She climbed the incline. Then she climbed Pikes Peak. And then she climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, for crying out loud. And now she's on national TV, having done the series Naked and Afraid. Mandy, welcome to the podcast again.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me again. It's a pleasure and an honor to get to speak with you every time.
The pleasure's all mine to have you on here. Really appreciate you being on here and spending some time with us. So, Naked and Afraid. Tell us what that shows for people who have not seen it. And I admit, I know that it's on. And up until you were on it, I can't say that I ever watched it. So tell everybody what the premise, we'll start off with that, the premise of the show is. What is Naked and Afraid all about?
Yeah, so the original premise of the show set out to answer if Adam and Eve were survivalists. And so what happens is they drop a woman and a man alone in a remote location and with minimal tools and obviously no clothes. And you're told to do your best for 21 days. This challenge was a regular 21-day challenge. They have other style challenges like fan challenges that are 14 days. And then they have XLs, last one standing. Like the Naked and Afraid franchise is so vast that the opportunities are endless there.
So when you do these shows, when these shows are done, not just when you do them, but when they're done, do the I want to say contestants, wrong word, participants, have they met each other before? Is this the first time they're dropped naked into a rainforest or wherever?
No.
Is this the first time they've met each other?
It is the first time that you are meeting this person. You are meeting them naked and alone out in a remote part of the world. In my particular instance, it was meeting Johnny in the Belizean rainforest. So it was a crazy and life-changing experience all in one.
Wow. You haven't met, but do you know anything about this person? Or, I mean, you truly are, this is the first time you've learned anything about them when you're dropped into this rainforest?
I knew absolutely nothing about Johnny before meeting him. I was actually very concerned and very worried about who my partner was going to be, not only like what is their skill set and what are they able to, put forward for the team, but also like how are they going to treat me? How are they going to react to the big shocking fact of, hey, this girl doesn't have legs and she's out here amongst a bunch of able-bodied people trying to attempt something that nobody else has ever done. And I got lucky in my situation. Johnny met me with respect right from the first moment, and it was like that throughout the challenge. Of course, we had our little arguments and differences, but nothing, we never fought dirty. You know what I'm saying? We never started demeaning or name calling the other. It was more just like, this is the situation we're in, and because you are closest in proximity to me, here's this frustration.
Who else you got to argue with, right? He's the only person there.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and we had a really great strength and conflict resolution out there. And I do wish that they would have shown more of our conflict just so that people could see and learn from that conflict resolution, because it was, I would say something or do something stupid and pretty much immediately just, hey, I probably shouldn't have said that or done that. And, we just moved on. It wasn't like we're gonna focus on this. And there was grace given to each of us from the other. And that really sets us apart from some of the other contestants in Naked and Afraid history.
Sure.
And I am just one episode in the season. I
Oh,
was
okay.
the season premiere. The episode is titled No Legs, No Problem. It is season 18, episode 1. And it is available now to stream on Discovery Plus, Hulu, Max, and I think there's a few other options as well. Just this one episode
Wow.
for our
Okay.
21-day challenge. So,
So they distilled 21 days, 3 weeks worth of stuff into what, an hour? Is it an hour, 2 hours? How long is it?
yeah, our episode was just an hour. I do think that Discovery made that as a stylistic choice to really highlight Johnny and I's partnership. In the episode, it shows that he gives me a couple piggybacks, and a lot of the internet now thinks that I just let people carry me around the woods, which couldn't be further from the truth. Uh, yeah. So it was a life-changing experience because, I'm out here in this extreme circumstance, and I only have one person and one tool to use to be able to, source water, get fire, and construct a platform, and then, shelter. And so, working with what I've got, I would say that I could not have had like a better partner out there, because Johnny's skills, he has skills that I don't necessarily have or have strengths in. Throughout the challenge, Johnny taught me that some of the most underrated skills in survival are the ones that aren't actually primitive, the ones that relate to your character, your integrity, your ability to give grace and, work well in conflict resolution. And he taught me a lot out there. I couldn't have had a better partner because my weaknesses were his strengths, and his strengths were my weaknesses, and it worked out really well. I started every fire out there. I sourced our water. I processed all the wood for fires. I cooked every meal. We had 8 different sources of food out there. So there was quite a bit more that wasn't shown in the episode, that I'm really, really proud of. And it's interesting to see how they edited it down. But I am, on the other side of it, grateful that it is now aired and out there. And I am overwhelmingly thankful for the massive positive response that I've gotten from the episode as well. So it's been interesting for sure.
I bet. So this was recorded. You did this past summer. Is that correct? Back summer
Yes,
2024?
this was recorded in 2024 in June into July. I flew out 2 days after my birthday in June 10th, which is ironic because most of my climbs start on my birthday as per tradition. starting back from Pikes Peak the first time. So,
So I guess one of the questions people would have, how do you get on this? How do you just send Discovery a letter saying, "Hi, look at me, I want to be on Naked and Afraid"? I mean,
uh,
how does one even do that?
the process to be on Naked and Afraid is rigorous. I mean, they put you through psychological testing, medical testing, XYZ. You have to meet with the casting department, then the executives with Naked and Afraid. And in my case, because I am so different of a situation, they put me in meeting rooms with executives over at Discovery because just like any other participant of Naked and Afraid, I applied through Metal Flowers Media. And shortly thereafter, I was contacted by EJ Snyder, who is actually a veteran legend of Naked and Afraid. And he did my intake interview. And I remember being on the phone with him, and I told him all these things that I had done, and he was like, "Wow, okay, this is cool. This is really cool." And then I was like, "But there's a twist. I did all of it without legs. I crawl." And he was taken aback by that, you know. He was silent on the phone for a couple seconds, and he was like, "Wait, so you don't use prosthetics or anything like that?" And I he's like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, okay, cool." Because I did interview an amputee at one point who said that they were going to use their leg to transport water, and I didn't think that that was very realistic, which I thought was hilarious.
Port? No, okay, okay.
But no, he passed me up the line as a viable prospect for the Naked and Afraid franchise, and from there I was put up in front of the executives, and they initially denied me. I actually got into a rather spicy interaction with
I
one
find
of,
that hard to believe.
I know. But the
I'm kidding.
interesting thing is like
I'm
she's
kidding.
one of my biggest fans now, and I adore her. But in this initial meeting, she was very concerned about my ability to carry a pot of water myself, you know. And I know that sounds like a very basic and simple thing, like but to somebody that doesn't know me or know how I live, like doesn't follow me on social media, you don't really get to see like all of the things that I'm truly capable of. Which was ironic because at the time of this meeting, I was sitting in my plant room. And so, head to ceiling to floor behind me was, you know, covered in plants all over my shelves and then hanging from the ceiling. And all I could think of was like, if I can manage to get a pot of water to take care of these plants, why would I not be capable of getting a pot of water to and from camp if I desperately needed to? Like, if my partner was, you know, not open to helping me or was otherwise injured and couldn't do it. Could I do it? Absolutely, but thankfully in my in my episode, I never had an issue with that. Johnny gathered the materials for the structure and the platform and the fire, and I did, did most of everything else. So it was um, that balance was really interesting to find with a stranger, and I'd attribute that to the fact that Johnny and I on insertion, I found out that he was from Columbia, Missouri, which is ironic because I am from Smithville, Missouri originally. And so I stopped in the middle of the trail and I was like, "You're a Missouri boy?" Yay! But There's a Midwestern mentality that I believe Johnny and I both possess where we take care of our neighbors and we genuinely care about the people around us. And early on, we both decided that we just weren't crossing the finish line unless the other was as well. So I'm so grateful to Discovery for introducing us. And, you know, seeing what happens because it introduced me to a lifelong friend, and I'm very grateful for his presence in my life.
That's awesome. So you kind of touched on this. I think you answered the question, but just to make it clear. So are you the first person with any type of handicap to have done Naked and Afraid?
I would not say that I'm the first person with any type of handicap to participate in Naked and Afraid. I know that there have been other participants that have survived traumatic events and later gone on to take on this challenge. I also know that there are other participants that, like me, struggle with PTSD. And so, in that way, I'm not the first handicap in that way. I am the first amputee to
Okay.
ever participate on the show, though. The show started airing in 2013 or 2014, and it's been one of the most popular and longest running reality TV series of today.
Was there anything that, and I guess this is probably a stock question everybody's asked when they go into these things. Was there anything extraordinary that that you experienced that you didn't expect to experience? I mean, obviously, you know you're going to be dropped in the jungle. You're going to have nothing with you. You're going to have somebody with you that you don't know. You have no idea how they're going to react, how your personalities are going to, how they're going to, they may clash, they may get along. It sounds like you guys got along great, which is obviously a positive. Was there anything that happened or anything that you experienced that was really completely out there, or were you everything go the way you kind of expected?
Um, no. No, nothing went as I had expected. In some ways, that was a good thing, and in some ways, that was a bad thing. This experience, and while the episode doesn't show these parts, um, this experience was very humbling for me. I have accomplished some really incredible things, but uh, it was very, very, very difficult. And there were a few times that I genuinely did not want to be in the jungle anymore. Like,
Mhm.
I want to go home. Like, I'm done. I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
I'm
Well,
thinking
too
for me that's
bad.
I'm thinking for me that's hour six, and you did it for 21 days.
No, actually, the first week was the most difficult, and it was the
Mhm.
most difficult for me because I went out there expecting them to partner me with somebody that had a wealth of advanced primitive skills that I didn't even possess. Because I didn't expect them to put me out there as a mentor on my first challenge. And that was one of the most difficult and complex parts of this challenge for me. And it wasn't shown in the episode, but I mean, I started every fire out there with the fire starter. I even once with a machete because I lost the striker and had a meltdown about it. But I sourced our water. I sourced I don't even know how to accumulate the number of how many snails we had over the 21 days. Genuinely, the first night that we brought snails back into camp to cook, we had 212. So, I mean, almost every night was like that. Thankfully.
So when you go to a French restaurant, is escargot going to be on the on the menu, or are you going to pass on that?
You know, I think I have eaten enough snails to last me for a very, very, very long time.
I just had to ask.
But it was, it was a very harsh environment and it was a very difficult challenge in terms of like the length of the challenge, the isolation, the caloric deficit, the sleep deprivation, and then, being cold, tired, hungry, and in one of the most extreme circumstances you've ever been in your entire life. I definitely had my low points out there. It was a strange experience midway through the challenge after things had calmed down a little bit. Um, there were several mishaps that happened in the first few days that just wrecked me. Like I went into this challenge so prepared and so ready, and by day 3 I was crying and being like, I don't know if I can do this.
Sure.
I would prefer to leave. Like maybe I bit off more than I could chew, and I needed that experience. I needed that experience, but I am grateful that Discovery in the edit of the episode, they they didn't include any of our arguments out there. They didn't include me crying. Ah, and I really appreciate that decision to allow me grace to try something for the first time without highlighting the negative or the sensationalizing the depth at how difficult this challenge really was for me. Uh, because I think the episode and what they did was really beautiful, and I appreciate that they chose to highlight our partnership instead.
So let's talk a little bit about the logistics of it. And I'm sure this you get asked this all the time. There's obviously other people there. Somebody's filming this, obviously, and some type of support. But what are the boundaries that they have in place? Are they just hiding in the bushes with a camera poking out someplace, or do you actually see these people? Do you interact with them at all? Or is the idea that I mean, I don't know. I can picture it being it's like hidden cameras and you don't even know anybody's there. I can picture that there's a crew right there with you. And how much do you interact with the crew, or do you not, or what's the boundaries there?
There are hidden cameras. I remember halfway through the challenge, I looked out the back of the shelter. I don't know what I was doing, but there was a camera and I was like, "Oh, I hadn't noticed that before. That's interesting." The shelter was mic'd up. But the crew and I want to say that this is probably a different circumstance for me than it was for other participants of the show because the crew is told to have minimal contact with the participants, and they really do. They film you for the morning, they film your exploration or seeing if you're going to source protein, and then they go home, or not, home, but back to their own hotel room. And it's a really interesting experience. Everybody on our crew was very personable and compassionate. I think it was impossible for them to witness what they did and not have some kind of compassion. And so we had Ben Staley, Kip Robbins, Carissa Fry, and Ricardo Garza, and several others that were a part of our production team. But those that I mentioned were the main members of the production team. And I was not allowed to go anywhere in Belize without somebody. without a production member or Johnny. And that was just for my own safety because Belize is home to big cats. And obviously, I can't run.
Right.
Um, while I did always have a member with me for safety reasons, they are instructed not to help you and they are instructed to simply observe. And so, they're watching us as we either, win and accomplish or fail and keep trying. And so at several points throughout the challenge, I mean, Johnny and I both, cried and laughed with these team members. So they became really good friends, and I hope that I get the opportunity to work with them in the future because all of them worked with me with the utmost professionalism and respect, and I would do anything for any one of them. So,
Cool. So when you get dropped in there, and I guess you're not really dropped in there. It's not like you're thrown out of a helicopter with a parachute or something, but I'm sure you're driven someplace or something like that. What was your first mission? Was it clothing? Was it shelter? Was it food? Was it water? What was the first thing you wanted to do when you get there? You meet Johnny, you figure out that you two are going to be spending 3 weeks together. What's the first thing that you wanted to take care of?
so in the first day, and they don't show this in the episode, but in the first day, I sourced our water. I started us a fire, and Johnny went and got materials to construct a platform to get me up off of the jungle floor immediately. Because I don't have a calloused barrier between me and the jungle floor, and because my um, because my sensitive areas are directly in contact with the jungle floor, it was of importance for me in priority to get up off of the jungle floor. Constructing the platform was more important than even the shelter for me. Um, and that was just to give myself a little barrier in between myself and the jungle floor because of bacterial issues. And of course, in Belize, there is give and take palm, which, if you're not familiar, it is a palm that is very, very thorny, very needle-like thorns, and I was having those thorns fester out of sensitive areas for weeks post-challenge. So,
Oof.
yeah, yeah.
Oof. Um, this is pretty incredible stuff. So let me ask you a question that I've been thinking in the back of my mind that we've been talking. You've done very incredible things since your mishap. Like I said, you started out by climbing the Manitou Incline, then Pikes Peak, then Kilimanjaro, and now this. Would you have imagined yourself being able to do this if you hadn't had your accident and you were a traditionally abled person with two legs and all your limbs? Do you think that this would have been something that you would have done regardless, or is this something that you wanted to do because of your disability, or is it something you did regardless whether you had a disability or not?
Um, it's it's hard to say what would have happened in an alternative reality where I had my limbs, but I will say that certain factors throughout my story influenced larger decisions for me, like starting in 2015. So I was staying at my parents' house post amputations, and one particular day I was watching Prospectors, which is conveniently based out of Manitou Springs at the time. And my dad woke up in a sour mood, I guess, and he walked out of the bedroom. He looked at me, and at this point, I was, amputated. I still had bandages on my legs and I had gained a lot of weight. I was on 22 different medications a day. And my dad goes, "You're a fat piece of shit that's never gonna amount to anything." And at the time, of course, I took personal offense to that statement. But
It would
now
be
I
hard
realize,
not to.
yeah, but it shaped the next 10 years of my life to prove him wrong and to prove myself wrong. Because at the beginning of this, post amputations, I genuinely believed that life was over. I wouldn't ever get to have exciting experiences. I wouldn't get to explore, um, hunt, fish, forage, any of the things that I grew up doing. And that was a very dark and impactful time for me. So I don't know. It's difficult to say if I would have gone on to be as successful as I am without my legs. But interestingly enough, I think the only thing that really truly sets me apart from other people is I get random ideas, crazy ideas, like this started with an idea to climb the Manitou Incline because of a joke, you know? And then when I was doing the Manitou Incline, we were joking that I should try to do Pikes Peak. And then the first time that I climbed Pikes Peak, Daniel Pond and I were joking, you should try Kilimanjaro. And it it evolved from a joke. The whole thing. I was curious too. Can I still do this? And doing Naked and Afraid was one of the best things I think I've ever done for myself because Johnny and being partnered with him taught me that if anyone's gonna save me, it's gonna be my goddamn self.
Okay.
And I I gained a lot of confidence in using skills that I spent years learning. And I'm just overwhelmingly grateful for the opportunity to go on the show. And do I think I would have done that if I had legs? I I have no idea because I remember watching Naked and Afraid post amputations in the hospital. Like, it's so wild to consider how this all really started for me. And I'll tell you another odd fact. Kyle Maynard is the first male amputee. He's missing both his arms and his legs. He is the first amputee to make it to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro without the aid of prosthetic equipment. And I messaged him when I was in the hospital. So and I've since had conversations with him and just it's so wild to think about how this all started for me. But the only thing that sets me apart from others is I put action behind thought. That's it.
Hmm.
A
So,
lot of the times I don't even know if I can do something and I am faking it until I make it. The first time I did Pikes Peak, no idea what I was doing. I climbed in jeggings, which are denim leggings. Like it's so wild.
yeah.
It's so wild.
So you mentioned early on a little bit ago that a lot of these things came out as a joke. You're doing the Manitou Incline. Somebody says as a joke, "Oh, maybe you should go do Pikes Peak." And then while you're doing that, somebody jokes around that, "Let's do Mount Kilimanjaro." How did this idea come about? Was it another joke, or did you actually decide that, What's the next big thing I can do? And let's just go for it.
So, actually, Naked and Afraid is known as the Everest of survival challenges. And as I am known formally as a mountaineer, the next step up from Kilimanjaro is logically Everest. However, for me, it's not morally or ethically responsible to climb over dead bodies, trash, and feces to get to a summit. It's just not. Um,
Right.
Part of the ethics in me climbing for conservation is I climb in places that are a little more remote and less known, um, or less popular to increase tourism, to increase awareness of the area. And so Everest is just not an ethical choice for me in any capacity, and it's not a goal of mine, nor will it ever be. However, the Everest of Survival Challenges happens to be one of my favorite reality TV shows, one of the only TV shows that I have watched every episode of more than once. And again, I was joking with some friends who sent me an application and were like, you should apply. So it's
And he- and here we are.
and here we are. Here we are. It's a wild life. Wild.
I wish more people had your ethical view of climbing Mount Everest. Not to get off the topic, but that has turned into such a what kind of a show up there, and it's just um,
No, and it's interesting because I have been very public about my choice not to climb Everest, and a lot of media shies away from saying that, or portraying that. And it's unfortunate because we are literally wrecking an entire ecosystem that was once pristine. Like, honestly, they need to shut the mountain down. It needs
right.
to be a no climb, no more any like it just and really what set this decision firmly in my mind is climbing Kilimanjaro. I had a team of documentarians that accompanied me, and my executive producer and my oh, director of videography were both in pretty bad situations with hypoxia and altitude sickness. One of them was sleepwalking and throwing up,
Mm.
and I mean, severe, severe symptoms of elevation sickness, and yet he refused to turn around. And I kind of decided between that situation and also seeing a very prolific climber who reportedly stepped over a Sherpa who had died on the trail, and I had just said no.
Yeah.
It's not a game I'm willing to play.
Well, nobody else may talk about it, but I'll applaud you for your decision. Um, not that climbing Mount Everest has ever been on my radar, but even if it was, just why do I want to go up and try to do this thing where there's 100 people in line waiting to spend 10 seconds at the top? And like you said, with the tragedy that you have to pass on the way up and on the way back, it's just like, you know, um, yeah, no, not doing that. Oh, so other people won't say it, but I'll say it. I applaud you for your stand on that because I think that's a good ethical stand to take on that. That just this isn't it. Um, Tell us a little bit more about Johnny. You kind of talked about him a little bit. Um, what kind of guy was he? Was he obviously sounds like you guys got along great. He was obviously a stand-up guy. He looked out for you, and you looked out for him, and you guys kind of split the duties and stuff like that. But what else can you tell us about Johnny?
Johnny is a rare gem of a human being. From meeting him and then later developing a friendship over, hometown Chateau Milk and Arthur Bryant's barbecue, and we spent a lot of time together out there talking. And one particular day, the crew asked me a bunch of heavy questions about trauma, and I was just not particularly having a good day. And the crew left, as they do. And instead of wallowing in sadness, I hopped in the shelter and I was like, Johnny, I know you want to sleep right now, but can we talk about food instead? And so we went down the mental grocery store aisles. Like, what's your favorite bread? What's your favorite soup? All the way down to your favorite flavor of Tic Tacs. His favorite are the orange ones. Unless he's actually using them for his breath, then he likes the wintergreen ones. But it was like that scene from Forrest Gump where Bubba is talking about all the different ways to serve and cook shrimp, and the Forrest Gump movie has been impactful in my own life, and he really is like a Forrest Gump kind of dude. He is. Um,
Sounds
one of
like
the
quite
most,
the guy.
yeah, one of the most incredible things about my relationship and friendship with Johnny in this challenge is I've worked with a lot of men. Obviously, I'm in a male-dominated field, and I have been for years. But Johnny had no ego. He let me use my skills. He let me show up and do my part. He never complained about me not having legs. He helped me when I needed help. He only carried me like 3 times throughout the entire 21 days. So, but I mean, having that kind of support was unexpected for me. I went into the challenge expecting to get somebody that was mad and angry to be paired with the halfling. I went into the challenge rather defensive. I was I was ready to fight. I was worried. And Johnny and I, we like I said, we had our disagreements, but we had great conflict resolution, and some people that have seen the episode saw me delegating tasks in frustration and then took to calling me bossy. And I've just come to the conclusion that you're not a real female leader until you have a few thousand people calling you bossy.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I'm okay with it. There are worse things to be known for. Um, and Johnny was one thing I really respect about Johnny is I am a very strong personality, but Johnny is quietly, he has a very quietly strong personality. And when he got tired of my bullshit, pardon the French,
Your bossiness.
when he got tired of my crap, he put me in my place and I respect him for it, He wasn't ever demeaning or rude about it. And likewise, there were times that I got tired of his crap and put him in his place. So I don't know. Johnny is an incredible individual, and I don't think that either of us would have been successful in the challenge without the other. We complemented each other so well.
I guess that's my other question leading up. What I'm leading up to is what would this have, we're playing guessing games here, obviously, and what ifs, but suppose Johnny had not been so supportive. And I mean, I know the idea is to work as a team, but suppose he said,
I
what am I
have
supposed to do with this woman without legs, and how the hell am I supposed to do this? What would have happened? What would have been? What do you think would have
I
happened if
mean,
he had not
you
been so
know
supportive?
me at this point.
Well, I do. But let's let the public in on what we're talking about here.
No, if Johnny had reacted any differently than how he did, it would have been an entirely different story. I would have withheld my knowledge and skills, and that would have severely adversely affected his success in the challenge. And oppositely, like I just it would not have been fun for either of us because I I'm I'm such a strong personality and I grew up under the belief that you had to be quiet and, kind of abide by orders. And now I'm an adult and I can stick up for myself and I will.
Yep.
Every single time. You will not you're not gonna get away with that.
I've read you. I've seen you take on people on social media who are less than nice, and it's not pretty. But and I'm not saying they don't deserve it. It's just it's not pretty when somebody gets on your bad side, and it's usually because they deserve for it to not to be pretty. So, um,
I, you know,
absolutely.
I have limits. I
Yep.
have limits like everybody. And it's interesting. And especially as I step more into a public figure role, of course, I brought on a manager, Jake with No Worries Entertainment, who's going to be helping me navigate this whole new world that I'm coming into. But I I'll be scaling back on my defensiveness.
Well, now you have somebody else to take care of it for you.
Exactly. That's
There you
that's
go.
the whole point. That's
There
the
you go. There you
whole
go.
point, Bob.
There you go. Um, Mandy, this has been a great conversation, like everyone we've ever had. Like I said, this will be number six, the sixth time we've talked on here. It's been a great conversation. What's next? I'm trying to think of what you could possibly do that's next, but what's next?
So it's interesting that you should ask that because I've been in discussions with friends this week and I've been in this kind of like midlife crisis. So I'm at this point where I'm about to graduate in May with my bachelor's in English and a minor in anthropology from the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, otherwise known as
Awesome.
UCCS. Thank you.
Congrats.
And while getting my education, I've managed to accomplish 7 world records now, also including my participation on Naked and Afraid. As I mentioned earlier, I had a team of documentarians that accompanied up my ascent of Mount Kilimanjaro, and this year, that documentary detailing the events of July 26, 2014, um, when I lost my limbs and my ascent of Mount Kilimanjaro, is expected to be released this year. And we have a lot of um, a lot of things going on with that, but I can't really
Hmm.
talk too much about it. But beyond that, what I have started doing because of these discussions that I've had about this midlife crisis is one of my friends identified it to me as astronaut syndrome. It's not actually astronaut syndrome, but it's a concept. And I didn't know this, but astronauts come back from space and they have no fulfillment out of the tasks that they're doing here on Earth. None. Mental health is a big concern for astronauts that come back from space exploration. And I resonate with that so much right now because for me, I started this journey in 2018, and of course, climbing on your hands is not a sustainable option for forever, but I don't I don't know where it goes from here in the climbing world. But there is the possibility and the slight chance that enough people watch the episode of Naked and Afraid and request me back that I'll get another opportunity to try a different Naked and Afraid challenge, perhaps. I genuinely, genuinely hope so.
Awesome. Well, you could go to space. You could become an astronaut.
I I don't like the idea of that. So, like, I am also the first female bilateral amputee to static skydive without prosthetic equipment, and that was back in 2018 or 2019.
And I kind of chuckled there, not because I didn't think you could do it, but only because I think you could do it if you wanted to. Obviously, I'm not here to talk you into or out of anything. But what I'm kind of chuckling at is after I asked that question, I'm thinking, well, if she wanted to, she absolutely could.
Yeah, I probably could if I really wanted to get a hold of the right people, but it's just not in the cards for me. And
Okay.
so something I'm doing right now before graduation is working on an outline for my first novel, which will be effectively a memoir detailing my life since limb loss. And I am going to do this in letter format so that I tell my story through a collection of letters that are very personal and introspective. And I hope that it is a impactful way to tell my story on paper. So
It sounds like we're setting ourselves up for podcast number 7 when your
let's
book
do
comes
it.
out. If we don't talk before that because you do something else incredible. Um, Mandy, as always, a wonderful conversation. Tell people how they can find you, website, social media. How can they find you, and tell us again where they can find your episode of Naked and Afraid.
Absolutely. You can search my name on Google. It's Mandy Horvath, Mandyhor, V as in Victor, ATH. My website is mandyhorvath.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at Mountain Gnome 0.5 or on TikTok at MTN Gnome. And I'm also on Threads as Mountain Gnome 0.5 and Reddit as Mountain Gnome Mandy.
If they go to your, so that's all out there. We'll get that in there. But if they go to your website, can they find all these links?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. Perfect. Mandy, again, a tremendous story. Yet another tremendous accomplishment from you. I'm in awe of the things that you've been able to do. Anybody who listens to your podcast, again, I'm going to link to all the ones we've done so people can follow your progression from when we first met. And the first podcast we did was back in 2018, so it's been a while. And listen to the things that you've done. Whatever you do next, A, it's going to be astounding, and B, it's not going to be a surprise to me, because at this point, nothing you do is going to surprise me at all. It just, you set your mind to it, you get it done. Really, really enjoyed the last, well, heck, about an hour we've talked already.
That went
Being
by
here.
so fast.
Well, that's a good sign. I guess that's a good sign. Again, a great pleasure having you on here again. I can't wait till the next time we have a chance to talk and have you on the podcast. It's been another incredible story. Everybody go check out this episode of Naked and Afraid. Again, Discovery Plus, correct?
Yes, it is available on Discovery Plus, Max, and Hulu, and the episode is season 18, episode 1, No Legs, No Problem.
Outstanding. Well, that pretty much describes you. No legs, no problem. I mean, that's anybody who knows you, that's the way you've been doing things. So I'm not surprised at all. Mandy, thanks again for being on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor.
Absolutely. And everybody, thank you for listening to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. We'll talk to you next time.